Why we love Wrath of the Lich King questing so much? Because it's fun.
If I asked you the question, which expansion of World of Warcraft you enjoyed leveling up the most in, what would be your answer? Maybe you adored the D&D-esque world building and lore that came with leveling in classic World of Warcraft. Or maybe you found yourself entirely immersed in your battle against Sargeras in Legion.
Oh yeah, Legion was
time
fun too.
leveling up your artifact weapon talent point by talent point. Or perhaps, like me, you believe that Wrath of the Lich King has some of the best leveling in World of Warcraft, whether you be a new player or a veteran. And I'm not the only one that thinks that. But why is Wrath of the Lich King so good when it comes to its leveling experience? And why do so many people, myself included, consider it to be one of WoW's best expansions when it comes to progressing to that level cap?
I know why. Because there was more lore and story added. Like, there are some quests that have like interesting quest lines that you can follow through. There was also one that I thought was like very interesting, and I just recently did that one actually on my Death Knight. And that's the one where you speak in an inn to the sister of the Zarian that is looking for her brother, because there are signs that he's apparently still alive and stuff like that. I mean, he's of course undead, he's a Death Knight, right? But like his sister is looking for him and stuff, and you have to find clues and stuff. Like, I feel like they moved away a bit from. There are still like fetch quests, like where you have to collect certain items or kill 10 mobs of this or 15 of this. Like, yeah, you still have those, but you have also way more interesting story now. You have like sometimes quests where you have to get something, and when you bring this back, then the NPC sends you to another mission. Or there was like this one farm is also like one of the early quests where there's like a farm and there's like a mine, and in the mine everyone turned freaking undead, and you have to discover what happened there and this and that. I feel like they made the stories way more like interesting for the quest than they were, for example, before in TBC and before that, because they were more simple, right? I feel like they started like the vanilla days. Yeah, the quests were quite simple. During TBC, it got a little bit more complex, and Wrath of the Lich King, this was when more story was added and there was actually more reason on why you do things, right? I think that's why, at least in my opinion.
Well, today, we're going to answer that question for those who have experienced Wrath already, as well as for those of you guys that have yet to undergo the journey. Wrath of the Lich King, guys, considered by many to be Blizzard's best work when it came to World of Warcraft expansions. Death Knights, Northrend, Arthas, Tuskarr, what's not to love, guys? Ever since the beginning, when this expansion was first announced, people were hyped as hell to get their boots onto the shores of Northrend to confront the Lich King. And unlike World of Warcraft's first expansion, Burning Crusade, Blizzard decided to do something quite different when it came to the introductory experience for Wrath. And that brings us to the first point as to why me and many people love Wrath of the Lich King so much, and that is number one, a feeling of choice. When a player first decides that he wants to go to Northrend, he is not funneled into the same zone as literally everybody else like in the previous expansion. In Burning Crusade, regardless of who you were and what you've done, everybody went through Hellfire Peninsula, which turned the entire zone into a massive cluster of chaos for several days after the expansion's launch. If you played classic TBC at launch, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It was wild all those years ago, it was wild recently. Yes. Fighting over mobs, the server lagging, crap.
What I hated so much, like when TBC launched, and like you were trying to do some quests, right? Even like it was not just TBC. If you made like a new character, you had so many people make new characters suddenly, because a lot of people are returning to the game, and not everyone had one ready that could enter the portal. So even if you made, let's say, a human paladin or something, and you were like leveling in the early zone, and there were like those wolves, if I remember correct, that you have to kill or something, right? And there were like so many players, and they would always steal the wolves away, and you had like no NPCs to kill for your quest, and it took you almost 1 hour for a starting quest. It was horrible. So many players, they kill everything, it just doesn't respawn for a couple of minutes, and if it respawns, sometimes somebody else was faster. And if you were in a melee class, or you had like, let's say, a paladin, then a hunter or something else comes like mage, and they shoot something before you even reach the target. And they get it. It was a pain. Yeah, by the way, guys, if you're new to this channel, please don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more content.
Ashes and more. The idea was neat in theory, but I don't think that the technology was up to par, and players, well, they didn't enjoy it as much as maybe Blizzard had hoped. Maybe those PvP players liked it with the world PvP and stuff, but I don't know. This is why Blizzard chose that in Northrend, a player would be given the choice of being able to quest in either the Howling Fjord or the Borean Tundra at the start of the expansion. And this choice that players were given was such a big success for Blizzard, and the idea of being able to choose your level up experience has been repeated multiple times ever since. Not in every expansion, but some expansions like Legion even, where players can choose any zone to start and quest in, and that was really cool.
Yeah.
You see, giving players choice creates replayability in a video game. It exposes the players to more storylines, and it makes things, well, not so repetitive. And as for the other zones, well, luckily, due to Wrath being sort of like classic OG WoW, things are not so linear. And that leads me to point number 2, and that is number 2. Things are not always so linear. Guys, you've been on the internet before, just like me, and you'll see these complaints about modern World of Warcraft expansions, and that is that the storytelling is just, it's too linear. A player just doesn't really feel like they're able to go off the beaten path so much to find their own journey. Like, yeah, maybe they could do a quest or two here and there, but they always just get funneled right back to the main storyline. And anybody who's a fan of games like Elder Scrolls or maybe some sandboxy MMOs like Star Wars Galaxies, well, they're gonna have a hard time fitting into this modern.
Oops, I misclicked. And yeah, like the thing about Skyrim, for example, what I loved so much about Skyrim and still loved even today is, like, you can randomly go to any city you want to and you get like interesting quests. There are so many guilds. We have the Thieves Guild, we have the Mage Guild, we have the Dark Brotherhood, we have the Companions, aka the Fighters Guild, sort of. It's not really the Fighters Guild in Skyrim. I mean, the Fighters Guild is completely different in Elder Scrolls, but they are similar, the Companions, right? And it's like cool how you can go to different cities, join different kind of factions, guilds and stuff, and you're like completely free to explore. Like I remember like one time I walked with my orc warrior that I made in Skyrim, and there was like a cave, and in front of the cave was an NPC standing that just gave me a random quest. And I thought this was like so fun, like how I have this kind of random encounter and stuff. And that's what he means, Nixxiom, by linear. Like, you don't have like one story you follow, you go to different places and you can pick up different stories from those places. And I think that's cool. You go into one environment, this environment has its own story, this environment has its own story. I think that's so fun. It makes exploring definitely very, very fun.
A fan of games like Elder Scrolls or maybe some sandboxy MMOs like Star Wars Galaxies, well, they're gonna have a hard time fitting into this modern game in this respect. But with this expansion, with Wrath of the Lich King, this older version of WoW, although yeah, Wrath does have these overarching zone storylines that do follow some linear quest chains, there are so many side quests and side stories and things to do in Northrend that really anybody can just go off and do their own thing whenever they want. In Northrend, it is still possible to be jumping between 2 or 3 zones at once, finishing different quest lines all at the same time, rather than just burning through the same quest line for hours on end in the same boring zone. You guys know exactly what I'm talking about. And this keeps questing interesting, for me at least. And I hope as well for others. Even when leveling my current character in Thoriel, I have found myself bouncing between Borean Tundra, Dragonflight, Howling Fjord, and a little bit of Grizzly Hills for a time early on.
Grizzly Hills.
And that's awesome because although each zone is beautiful, having that variety of choice just makes things so much more interesting. But having choice wouldn't really mean all that much if the choices that you were presented with, the various zones, were just garbage. And that leads me to number 3. The beauty of the frozen Northlands. You know, fellas, Northrend itself, in many ways, is a main character of Wrath of the Lich King, right next to the Lich King himself. The frozen mountains, the pine trees, rolling rivers, the beautiful soundtrack, the whole continent. This northern landmass has some of the most breathtaking vistas and locations that you can find in World of Warcraft. And for me, one of the best things about this expansion is just, well, the scale of it all. Everything is giant in Northrend, from the monsters that were
Yeah, I have to agree on that, and I feel like it's not. I'm not sure if it's because of the questing and that it's like a bit slow. I mean, all the quests are usually a bit slow in classic WoW, but I feel like you also spend a lot of time in each zone in Northrend. Like if you're leveling through the Borean Tundra, for example, like it's not a zone you go to for like just a day. Like you can stay there for several days and you still have stuff to do in there and stuff. And I like that. Like I don't like it when you have like one zone and you finish this in just a day or like a couple of hours and then you're in like the next zone. Like I like when you can stay for a bit in one zone, even like several days, and then move on to the next one and you still have stuff to do, right? Like, and this is really good in like Wrath of the Lich King, where you have this kind of situation where one zone can last you for days, right? I think it's cool.
Monsters that we're fighting, to the lands that we're traversing. The storm peaks tower over the whole of the continent.
Beating up
Giant
giants.
cliffs descend deep toward the ocean waters below. Ice-crowned citadel looms always in the distance, hovering over the land masses. Northrend makes a person, a player, feel small compared to the land that they're questing in. And it's that sense of scale, that sense of beauty, that makes people love questing in Northrend so much just from a visual and immersive perspective. Because after all, guys, seriously, would you prefer to level through Grizzly Hills over and over? Or Tanaris? Storm Peaks? Or the Badlands? Now, I know that this is a very subjective point, and I know that there are some people out there that would say, yeah, Tanaris and Badlands, I'd rather be there. But I think for most of us, for many people at least, Northrend just has an effect on people that makes them want to quest through it due to its world, its character, and its scale. But none of that would matter if it didn't have a good story. And that leads me to my final point. Number 4, Northrend tells a story like none other. This, I think, is the big one. People just love Wrath of the Lich King's storytelling. And no, not just through cinematics like the Wrathgate or that buggy as hell Battle for Undercity questline. I'm talking about the storytelling even through regular quests. The mundane collect this, go there, and do these sorts of things. Even these quests, when
Oh, and for those of you that are like super hyped about Dragonflight, Wrath of the Lich King is also where it kind of like started for Dragonflight when you think about it, right? Because you're being introduced to a lot of important characters and you learn more about them, like Alexstrasza and stuff, and you have like quests with like the Dragonflights and different aspects of the Dragonflight and all that. I feel like Wrath of the Lich King really also built up for now Dragonflight that is coming. And I'm pretty sure we're going to see, and I don't want to spoil it too much, but I already saw like a lot of prominent, very familiar faces that we are going to see again. So yeah, here's that too. Like there's a good foundation also lore-wise that was built up with Wrath of the Lich King. And I wouldn't be surprised if like even more of Wrath of the Lich King that was like created and shown here for the first time is going to be used for any other upcoming WoW expansion even after Dragonflight. I wouldn't be surprised because they laid a good foundation for story here.
I'm talking about the storytelling even through regular quests. The mundane collect this, go there, and do these sorts of things. Even these quests, when given a chance, have incredible stories to tell for those of us who can't get enough of that Warcraft lore. And you know, if you think about it, these quests are somewhat of an oddity in World of Warcraft. They're not exactly cinematic and linear like in the modern game's quest lines, but they're also not entirely text-based so that all the plot is found in paragraphs like in, you know, the original classic WoW. No, these are Wrath quests. Quests that still require a bit of reading, a bit of discovery, problem solving, and even repeatedly dying like on that one Drakuru questline I made a video about recently. And we must also not forget that Wrath is also the conclusion to Warcraft 3's storyline, which so many people loved and enjoyed back in the day. For many, it was their entire reason for checking out World of Warcraft, to see what would become of their favorite character, Arthas the Lich King. But where people expected a story just fully centered around Arthas, what they found was something a whole lot more on Northrend. From meeting the Vrykruel, learning about the origins of humanity in Azeroth, befriending the Tuskar, delving into the mysteries of Ulduar, the Curse of Flesh, encountering Yogg-Saron, meeting the Dragonflights for the first time properly, and a whole lot more. Even the story had an immense scale to it. Wrath
True.
just had so much in terms of its storytelling, and people absolutely love it, including myself. And if you are someone
It's
ready to
the best
delve a little
classic
deeper into one of Wrath's
version.
best quest lines, in my opinion, check out this video on your screen right now,
This
because
thumbnail.
this is a
Don't
quest
miss this
line in
quest.
Wrath of the Lich King.
Maybe I'm gonna check this one out too, guys. And oh wow, no, but I agree with him here. I think Wrath of the Lich King, this was the time where questing started to get interesting. Like, don't get me wrong, there are also some quests and quest lines that I enjoy in TBC. And I think also the one, especially like on the Horde side, is really good, right? Where you meet the Mecha Orcs for the first time in the Outlands. It's not called Draenor, it's called the Outlands, right? And yeah, it's interesting, definitely. Like, I already have like made some good experiences. I'm also trying to now reach max level. I'm on my way there, and I have to say I'm actually not bored while questing. I'm not bored at all in Northrend, because I remember back in the day, like some quests I forgot because it's been so long ago, right? If you don't play something for like 10 plus years, then you just forget, right? But it's definitely interesting. And one thing I also love a lot about Northrend, it's how you have those different kind of environments. You have those like super flat areas, like especially like Borean Tundra, for example. It's pretty flat, right? And you have like Grizzly Hills, and then you have like Howling Fjord and all that kind of stuff. And like every area looks very different. They're all like sort of like cold climate zones, right? But they're unique, even though they are cold climate zones all, because Northrend is a cold continent. But they somehow, this is something that I really have to give Blizzard credit for, they managed to create a cold continent with zones that are all unique looking and not the same, and you can really walk through one zone and you know, oh, that's a different zone, it's not the other one I was in, and you're still in a cold climate environment. I think they did really good with that, no, seriously. But yeah, if you guys enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give this one a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed yet, please consider subscribing. And yeah, what do you think? Which expansion is the most fun expansion in World of Warcraft to quest through? I really like Wrath of the Lich King, but I also really like, and I know maybe like a lot of people are not going to have the same opinion, but I think Warlords of Draenor was not too horrible. And Legion, of course. Legion is also really fun. So yeah, maybe like Warlords of Draenor, Legion, Wrath of the Lich King for me. Those three, very fun to quest through. Like, I've done time walking usually. If I level like new characters up, either I also... I mean, I haven't done much Wrath of the Lich King because I was waiting for it to come out because I knew it would come out. But it's very fun there. Yeah. So yeah, I wish everyone a wonderful day. I will see you guys next time.